And I think you've highlighted a couple big follow-up questions. So, when we talk about some of the pros and cons of the plan, being one, I'd love to highlight some of the different tax benefits. You mentioned being a qualified plan, and then you mentioned obviously the cons being the cost. Are there
Yeah.
any other things outside of the cost that you see as a big con? And then I'd love you to highlight some of the different tax benefits and how those work as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the industry, and this is where really what comes to light, which is incorrect from those that we end up competing with that are investment bankers, and they're very good at what they do. If you just want to represent and hire an investment banker or an investment banking firm, and there's very good ones out there, to represent, create what they call a SIM, which is a memorandum document that you take to the public, and they shop it with private equity and strategic buyers, and they'll charge you a fee for that. That's a positive way to exit. It's a positive way to get money, and it takes away a lot of the theoretical risk. And there's really no complexity to it because it's just like selling a piece of real estate. You find that you shop it to the highest price bidder, they buy it, and you negotiate the terms, and then you get a check and you walk away. So that's pretty easy to do from a process standpoint. And ESOP, part of the challenge and part of what the investment bankers will say is they'll tell you that ESOPs are so complicated, there's so many moving parts, it's too difficult, you'll never want to do it, you'll get impatient through the process. And I will tell you, it is there's a lot of complexity to it because the tax benefits, and we'll address the tax benefits as a positive. Because anything that provides significant tax benefits under the US tax code is going to create complexity because the IRS demands it. And you have to follow all the guidelines and rules. But all that being said, that's what firms like BTA does. And there's a number of very good firms in our industry that do exactly what we do. We keep the clients out of the fray of doing the work and following all the complexity. And it allows them to really continue operating and running the business, which is critical because you want to continue to keep that cash flow being driven. And then we keep the owners and the management team focused on what they do. And then we take on the responsibility of working with the team and all the players to make sure the transaction gets completed and done, both timely and that all the wishes of the client are fulfilled. That's what a firm like ours does to keep them out of it. We get back to the basics of where is the risk? The risk is in cash flow. I mean, fundamentally, like any business, cash flow drives the success of that company. And so volatile cash flow companies shouldn't be looking at ESOPs. And companies that do have a downturn, and this is what gets into owners that do ESOPs care as much about the operations and the legacy and want to see it perpetuated. So one of the reasons why that seller note is so valuable in the way the company will operate is we have had, and I would love to say every deal we've done has been perfect. We had one failure in over 400 transactions, but that company would have failed. It was a home builder. I think, Carl, you live in Florida. You have residency in Florida. It was a home builder in South Florida. We did an ESOP in 2007. We all know what happened in the home construction world in 2008, 2009. The company went from multi-$100 million annual revenue to less than $12 million in revenue, and you just can't survive as a company doing that kind of construction in the home space or in any business. So byproduct is cash flow is important, but why those seller notes are so valuable is because when a company, and when we stress test a transaction, we show that theoretically a company can have a 40% decline in revenue and still meet its working capital, operating expenses, CapEx requirements without laying anybody off, and still meet its overall debt obligations. It's when you drop below 40% decline, if you still haven't laid anybody off, or the likelihood is most executives in that scenario will have reduced their working capital requirements, reduce their CapEx requirements. But let's assume that didn't happen. Because of that seller note, the owner can always defer principal and interest payments. They can defer principal payments and add them to the back end so that the company can recover from a cash flow standpoint. They can either put a complete hold on interest and principal up until the company recovers. It doesn't mean you're not going to collect it. You'll collect it plus the accrued interest that would have been paid. But the byproduct is that's what gives the protection to the company to survive significant macro downturns that might take place from an economic standpoint. So that's where the risk applies, and that's where also the offset takes place on how you look at the recovery.